Hey guys, hope all is well. This episode 56 of the Rugby Recap. You have myself, Rugby Itch, as well as the Q lads. First of all, man, how you doing?
I'm doing very well, Tim. Of course, we've been waiting for it for a wee while, but playoff rugby is finally here. We've got some big matches, including a final actually taking place for the Gallagher Premiership. The URC and Super Rugby games, they're going to be something. I feel like there's more hype for one competition than the other, though, I'll be honest.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. But hey, as we are kind of nearing towards that time where, yeah, like you said, it's playoff footy right now. So I'm pretty excited. But before we kind of get into all the kind of matches as well as the results from last week, guys, make sure to click the like button. We greatly appreciate that. Subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Check out our respective channels, and yeah, let's get straight into this. So, with the results that happened last week for Super Rugby, again, there were some big kind of results that happened that kind of switched the leaderboard a few kind of places around. Again, we got the, I guess, not the expected result, but kind of what we all thought was eventually going to happen, where the Crusaders, yes, they did indeed win against Mono Pacifica, but it wasn't enough to kind of put them in that eighth position, as the Fijian Drua did go on to win against the Rebels in that contest. So it's one of those from a Crusader standpoint. It's odd not seeing there, but like seeing them in this stage. But at the same time, it's actually good. I think it's good for Super Rugby just in general, because we've had them for the last 5 years they've won Super Rugby in a row. So I think it's time to have a kind of a new champion. And I think there's some good teams going for this year. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But what's your thoughts on that in terms of like the Crusaders missing out? Do you think they can bounce back next year, or do you think this was a bad year which could continue on?
No, I think they'll be a lot better next year. They had quite a few close games, like I always said, in terms of like I believe it was their last 5 games, they had pretty much been within 7 in all of their losses. So it's one of those ones that, yes, they're on the wrong side of the results this year, but I do think that they will get a little bit better. Plus, at the end of the day, I think that it is good for the competition, because if they had qualified as 8th and then they go on next week and knock out the favourites or something like that, I feel like that loses a lot of credibility due to the fact that they had so little wins throughout the season. So, the right side, I believe, went through, but unfortunately, I mean, the quarterfinals, in your honest opinion, right? Let's just say the Fijian Draw were the side that finished in 8th. Of course, with their bonus point, they actually boosted up a little bit more. But who do you think would have had the better chance of beating the top of the table? The Draw away from home, or the Crusaders if they had made the 8?
Well, that's the thing, is that I think honestly the Crusaders would have a better chance in beating the Hurricanes, because again, look, Fiji and Jura, we've kind of talked about them throughout this whole year, how they just still haven't been able to get a win away. So that's the key fact. Like, you can go off like just how well they've done, at home, because like we've said many times, they are a different team when they play at home. But when they've gone against any team in this competition away, they just haven't been able to get the results. So it's one of those where going into that game, which we'll discuss later on, it's you're not feeling as confident as you would maybe going with someone like the Crusaders, who are kind of more coming back. You can say more of like a resurgence recently in the last few weeks, and had the opportunity to kind of steal that number 8 spot. But just again, the performances earlier on this season kind of let them down, and kind of they paid the price for that. But look, in terms of the other results, of course, we had the likes of the Reds beating the Waratahs, kind of sealing. It was actually a close battle between those two sides. Only separated by 1 point, that one. And again, the Hurricanes kind of making easy work of the Highlanders, getting a bonus points win in that, which is again very crucial towards what happened in terms of the top of the table of the leaderboard. And again, the other results, Blues versus Chiefs. So this came kind of interlinked with that, with the Blues needing to get a bonus point following that Hurricanes win. Of course, literally just crumbled, you could say, in that last minute through Josh Oney, I believe, who scored that try. So yeah, man, I was so gutted watching that. I'm so happy I decided like last minute to okay, you know what? I won't do a live stream for this, because it'll be the last chance I could watch a game with my dad, just like both of us together, and I'll just live stream the rest in terms of the playoffs. But man, I was just all over the place watching. I was like, oh, you gotta be joking me. It felt like a loss. It actually felt like a loss, actually, that kind of moment. But what was your take on that in terms of like the top two? Like, did you see that kind of happening, or did you think the Blues would hang on?
Well, people did feel like it was going to be a harder game for the Blues to get that bonus point. And to their credit, they did almost enough to be able to have it.
Yeah.
It was just that last little moment. And I feel like, that may play into a bit of a storyline if the Chiefs face the Blues later on in the competition. They'll be able to say, we're the reason you don't have that home final if you make it all the way. But then, of course, that depends on what the Hurricanes are able to do in the near future. They have got themselves the Rebels in the quarterfinal. I'll be honest, some of these quarterfinal matchups, they aren't hidden the same way that I hope that they would. You know, like we've got the Blues versus Drua, which it's going to be a good game, but can the Drua finally do it away from home? You've got the Rebels versus Hurricanes, which seems like it should be a pretty one-sided affair, definitely because the last time the two sides played, the Canes beat them by around 25, and that was with their weekend side, so... You know, there's a few matches. I think the best of all of them is actually going to be Chiefs versus Reds, because it's the question at the moment, are the Chiefs actually going to find that form that everyone thinks that they should have found about 5 weeks ago? They've just done little things wrong. I mean, we saw it in the game up against the Blues. That first half, they looked, I'll be honest, absolutely awful throughout that first 40 minutes. But then they still came back into it and almost made it a little bit of a reasonable score. But I'm going to ask you a question, Tim. We're halfway through looking at those games, of course, but just at the moment, in terms of now that you've seen the top 8, and you know we've seen who's got the home sides and whatnot, who at this very moment is your pick to win Super Rugby? Are you going with your Blues, or do you think there's another side that might seal the deal, based off purely what we've seen in the last few weeks, and who's got the advantage going further forward? Who are you picking?
Yeah, look, I will be honest with you. I think I've kind of gone back and forth between two teams here, and of course, those two teams being the Hurricanes and Blues. I think I would have said the Blues just right off the back, really, because I believe when you look at the statistics, they're definitely seen as the better team from that side of that point of view. Like they're kind of playing in a similar way to what we've seen towards the Crusaders in previous years, like how they beat teams through their defense, and that's kind of what wins championships. And I believe that's what the Blues are doing. So I'm not saying they can't do it, but the thing is that you also have to take notice of the Hurricanes, who are now officially top that leaderboard, and with that they have that home advantage going into that final when they if they do get to that final. So it's one of those where. Look, I think it's in favor of the Hurricanes at this moment. I think just because they have that home advantage going into that final, that's like the key thing. And really, it's like a psychological blow, like already to the Blues, like that they've already lost that. So it's one of those where it's going to be tough because, look, if you're going through like the teams that, I mean, we'll talk about this when the quarterfinals, kind of when we give our takes on who we think we're going to go through. But it's going to be tough, even semifinals, to actually predict in terms of those ones. So I think it's all up in the air. I think, in my opinion, I think any team really, I'd say the top 4, even maybe number 5, could even do it. So like, there's an interesting conversation around these teams. But I think for now, if I had to say one, I'd say the Hurricanes. But hey, I'm not going to back down. I'm not going to go against my Blues in terms of like saying they don't have a chance. I'm just saying at this current point in time, I'd say the Hurricanes. But yeah, look, I mean, just kind of alluding towards what you were saying there. Again, just going off the last results from last week was Brumbies Force beating the Force there. But again, no Ben Donaldson, similar towards the Rebels, where they kind of rested their number 10 for the next. Well, actually, they didn't actually get the rest in because they're not even in the playoffs. But anyway, it's one of those like where I still think they had a good season from that standpoint. And actually, Curtly Bill actually impressed me in that game. He played there at kind of a few at 10 position, and I actually recently saw he may have been called up to the training squad for the Wallabies. So that's interesting to see. But no, in terms of the of course the fixtures this week going in for Super Rugby Pacific, as we kind of alluded to already, the first one being the Chiefs versus the Reds. Like you said, this is probably the one you could say is going to be the closest one out of the two teams. Like this is probably the best opportunity I think for the Australian team to actually get one over the New Zealand team, in my opinion. Again, we'll discuss obviously the Brumbies in a bit, but I think like in terms of a teams going to New Zealand, I think the Reds have a better chance to beat the Chiefs than the Rebels beating the Hurricanes. So, what's your take on this one? Which way do you think it's going to go?
Well, that's the thing. The Chiefs' current form is, like I mentioned earlier on, not their best that they've had, but you wonder whether or not that's just been a little bit of maybe a stutter before getting to the main event, and now that they're in those quarterfinals, maybe that's when they start gelling. Same roughly backline what they've gone with majority of the times with Ratama, McKenzie, and they've got. I'm very confused, Tim. I'll be honest. What's been happening with Super Rugby teams right before kickoff that we're losing like 4 or 5 players in positions. The
Yeah,
Blues did it. What happened to Ioane? He ended up being taken out late, didn't he? And then for the
yeah.
Chiefs, they lost like 3 or 4 players from their sides. Is it just like this is just a technicality at this point, having a lineup? But it seems like they're all getting changed before the game anyway.
Yeah, I think it's one of those where like they're just trying to be a bit more safe in this. Like I think it's a bit of two things actually. One, like it just may just be an injury, which they just need kind of take caution on, just because with the playoffs coming in this week, they have to understand that okay, that's the priority. So they can kind of just save their energy. But at the same time, there could also be a bit of like like a bit of tactics in there going on, like maybe like last minute changes, maybe kind of switching out a few players in and out. But yeah, look, we're going off the line. That's what we see right now, so we have to go off those ones. But like you said, like you alluded to, with the Chiefs, they have a pretty decent team overall. I mean, like having Sean Stevenson and Moni Narwhal this time around is definitely going to impact their side. And again, Hippie, Anton Brown, it's a solid side in terms of that back line. Even Tupou Vava'i, because he was definitely missed in that game against the Blues, I believe. So just overall, I think they have a really good squad, I'd say, in terms of that starting 15. But then you look at the Reds, though, and actually, I think the Reds actually in recent weeks have actually picked up a bit of form. And again, they have a solid squad there. With their front row, I think is particularly impressive there with Alex Hodgman there getting number one spot, number one, Matt Faza there, Jeffrey Allen number 3. Like I honestly think the reason why I think the Reds have a chance in this is that I think they actually have a better front row in terms of the front row and the bench. They can impact off both sides, I think, because they have talent for they have good props actually when you look at it in terms of experience. And I think in terms of their hooker, you could make a case he's been one of the best in the competition. So it's like that they have all the form in terms of that kind of front row. But then when you look at the back line, I think the Chiefs are just so stacked in that from that. So it's very tough kind of going who has the better kind of team. But yeah, man, I'm going to you first because I'm still undecided here. Like, which way do you think this game will swing? Do you think it'll go in favor of the Chiefs, the home team, or do you think the Reds could get a scalp here and maybe take them for the money?
Well, there's that old school saying, isn't there? And that's to do with the forwards decide the game, the backs decide by how much. And you mentioned there that you feel like the Reds got that advantage in the forward back. And the benefit that they've got compared to some of the other Aussie sides is they haven't lost 10 players to injuries in those propping positions. Shout out to the Waratahs, who, unfortunately, if you've got prop on your resume, you aren't finishing the season. But I think that the Chiefs, their backline, my concern, once again, the fact that Amoni Narawa and Sean Stevenson both got taken out of last week's game. Is there an injury that's underneath there that they don't really want to, admit too much of? Because if there is, and one of those two go down very early in the game, yes, they've got Daniel Rona as a replacement, but what if the other one also ends up getting injured? Those last-minute changes have got me questioning, was it tactical or was it because there was a serious reason that they had to take those guys out? And I think that the fact that there are so many late changes, that is also due to the fact that they announced the side so early. These sides have still got maybe 2 or 3 more training sessions before the weekend in terms of times to risk injury. But I mean, I'll be honest, the home field advantage should do more in this game than I think that it is going to. But I think it's going to be a really good game. Referee Ben O'Keefe, so I think it will be a relatively strict one when it comes to the breakdown, but who's got the better discipline between these two sides at the moment? That is probably the big question as well, because they've both been known for giving away a few silly penalties throughout the last little while. I think it's going to be who's going to get less cards, Jacobson or Fraser McWright, and whoever side has less cards in that regard, they'll probably win.
So, are you still undecided as well? You just don't know which way?
I'm just going to go the home side. I'm going to say the Chiefs will finally start to find that momentum, and, we'll see what happens. I still feel like Wallace Satiti should be off the bench and Jacobson should be 8, though. I feel like, that's just one big change that I would make. But other than that, the backline is pretty much what people would expect. Quintapaya maybe to go in for Poi Hippie, but other than that, it's been the best that it can be, really, throughout the season. In terms of the names, it's just whether or not the names can actually step up in this game. It's a playoff, but last time, I mean, the Reds are one of those sides. They've caused a few upsets throughout the season up against New Zealand sides. In fact, they've done very, very well up against New Zealand teams, which is something that not many Aussie sides have been able to say.
Yeah, look, I hate to say this. Like, I don't mean this in any way like that one player can change a game, but I think the Reds are missing such a key player in Harry Wilson not being available for this game because I honestly think like I may be wrong in saying this, but like I think if he was available, I actually would pick the Reds to win this game. I actually think the Reds actually have a strong chance of beating the Chiefs here, just because I think they've demonstrated this year that they can beat New Zealand sides. Like they've demonstrated they can do that, and they've beaten the Chiefs at home. They beat the Crusaders away. Like they've they've actually demonstrated for the first time I think in a long time where they actually you can't really count them out. And again, Harry Wilson, just to his credit, was a big part in both those games. Do I remember? Even Fraser McWright, of course, who has been brilliant this season. But just it's a big blow not to have him. And again, you have Bryant there, who's obviously replacing him. But it's just it's not at the same level as what Harry Wilson can give you. So that's why I think I have to lean towards the Chiefs. I'd say going for this one, but I want the Reds to do well here. I want them to kind of keep this a close game, and even like I don't know, maybe it goes down the wire. You never know here, but yeah, I think I'm going to go same as you here and just stick with the Chiefs. And again, I'm kind of thinking more in the long term as well. Like which team do I think kind of give a bigger fight in terms of that semi? I think it'd be better to see the Chiefs there. But at the same time, maybe Harry Wilson is available. I don't know. I don't think he would be available, but still, I'm gonna bet the Chiefs. I'll bet the Chiefs for that one. But again, for the second semifinal, semifinal, we're not even there yet. Jeez. But for the quarterfinal, we have the Hurricanes versus the Rebels, and this is one where, again, I know you said earlier, this is probably the one where you expect this to be just kind of like a one way in terms of like just how you predict this game. But I honestly think the one thing that could actually surprise us a bit is that this is likely or could be the Rebels' last game within Super Rugby. So I think it's one of those like where they're definitely going to have a bit of motivation to kind of prove a lot of people wrong in this game. And I mean, what better scenario to do it actually against the top of the table in terms of Hurricanes, who again have been we've pretty discussed, they've been impressive, like really impressive this season. So again, they should win this, the Hurricanes. I just think right off the back, I'm kind of just saying they should be winning this because again, when you look at that kind of back line of theirs, it's a really nice back line, and it's weird to say that because like you would normally like think of like. By the way, I'm not saying it's weird. I'm just saying like more like you would normally think of like the Blues or I'd say even like the Chiefs or even like the Crusaders as having a better back line just when you're looking at the names. But to be fair, the Hurricanes players, like the names that you know that have potential, but will they get to that stage have just exceeded expectations to the next level, I think, this year. And again, like a list of players just in kind of what I'm saying along with is like Ruben Love, incredible season for him. Billy Proctor has done really well for himself. Again, they've kind of gone in and out, I'd say, of Kanina Hollow and Riasi. But again, Riasi kind of demonstrated last week that he deserved that kind of starting spot there. So happy to see that he's got selected over Kanina Hollow there. And again, Josh Wolby as well had a good season. Like, a lot of these players Jordy Barrett, you kind of expect a lot from him. And he's done, he's been very consistent, I think, throughout. So yeah, and even Teach Bernard. Like it's just like they have so many names here, like where like you could just name off the back. There's a lot more I can name just because like they're just a great side to watch this year. But yeah, I mean, I want the Rebels to do something here. So I want to get your take first before I kind of give my prediction in this. But what's your thoughts on this one?
I think you almost listed every back other than
I just
Cameron, a little shout out there. What he's done at 10.
Literally every back deserves a match. Like I could name the whole team if I wanted to be fair. To them, but gosh.
But yeah, I would say that this Hurricane side are, to be honest, they're in their best position they've been in for a long time for a chance of a Super Rugby title.
Yes,
and it's good to see that TJ Perenara is available for this game. There were a few concerns after last week.
Yeah,
in terms of him and Billy Harmon, they were having a bit of back and forth, weren't they? A bit of feeling. In that game.
I was laughing at that. That's good.
But, I feel like the Rebels, you mentioned about it, how there's a chance this is their last game. And that can, of course, motivate players. But at the same time, I know it sounds terrible to say, but as a Rebels player, if you've stuck by them for so long as a club and then they get rid of you, you could also have the mindset of, what's the point? We're going to get our best ever finish, yet we've been sacked from the competition. Yeah. So a big F you to Australian rugby. And how about you go F yourselves? It's probably the mindset that some of them may even have. But of course, there's also, like I mentioned, it's a trial because these guys are now looking for new jobs and they have to try and find a new club.
Yeah.
So this is your game that I guess everyone will look at as this is the last performance from this team. Who can we scout and who can we take from a dying side? So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that either motivates or kind of deteriorates the motivation of this Melbourne Rebel side. I do think that the Hurricanes on paper just look very strong. And yes, there's a few
Yeah.
X Factor players in there for the Rebels, such as Callaway. Although saying that, he's already signed with the Tars, so he's all happy. He's got a job going
Yeah.
into next year. You know, you got Darby Lancaster out on the wing, Dalgunu. Carter Gordon didn't play last week because of those concussion symptoms were
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
slightly hanging around. So I feel like he's only one big knock away from possibly being out of this game as well. That's the problem with such a long, strenuous season. You know, you nurse an injury and you just keep on finding it coming back up to get you. Like Rico Ioane, for instance. How many concussions has he had this year? Like
Yeah.
two? And then he's
I was
missed
literally going
quite
to
a
mention
few
him as
other
well.
games too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. But I do think the Canes, this is, for me, the clearest favourite of the weekend. And I know that that's bold to say because of the Drua versus Blues, and Drua haven't won away from home, but you know, they're still Fiji and they've still got a little bit of fight in them no matter what
Yeah.
normally. So, yeah, I'm saying the Canes to win this comfortably.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Again, like, yeah, I could swing it like if I wanted to. I can play like devil's advocate here and be like, you know what, maybe because it's the Rebels' last game, you could kind of tip them to have a better chance against the Hurricanes than Fiji and Jura against the Blues. But I think I am with you in that case, where it's just one of those where the Hurricanes should do the job here, and yeah, just show what they've done throughout this whole season and kind of just do it once again in this quarterfinal matchup. But I guess in terms of the next quarterfinal, there is the Blues versus Fiji and Jura. This one it's going to be a really interesting game to watch because the Blues, like, just going off what I saw in that game against the Chiefs, like I said before, and it was really like a psychological blow, really, that game. Like, yes, we won it, but we didn't do it the way we wanted to in terms of getting that bonus point. So it's one of those where the Blues are either going to have they need to have a positive reaction going into this game, and it's one of those where they've made some changes to the starting lineup, which is good to see. The big one actually being that Parafeta now is at the 15, and then Harry Plummer's at the 10. Finley Christie now starting as well, which is massive because it's one of those where he actually. But by the way, I was actually going to get onto this. He actually played very well. I thought in that game against the Chiefs. Like he was like there was like one kick where I thought it was a rubbish kick. Like when I was like, why are you doing that? And then like he kicked it into like the. I was like, whoa, okay, actually that's awesome. Okay, put them into their own 22. Like, and that's the experience he brings. Like again, like Funaki's more energetic, I say, in the middle of the field, like where similar to Christie, where he's good in like kind of moving around, I guess, and kind of finding that pass. But Christie just has, you know, as expected, has just a lot more experience in terms of finding spaces. So it was good to have him back there. And I'm trying to think who else is missing out in this side. I think that they've burned there. I believe he's partnering up with Tupeloto, I believe, at the locking spots. They've chosen
because Derry got concussed, didn't he? He
Yeah.
failed his HIA.
But I'm surprised they haven't gone with Lachlan McWannell. Like maybe he's injured. Maybe I'm not sure if there's still an injury there. I haven't checked up on that. But again, they've chosen Riccatelli over Eklund, which I think is fair. I think that's a fair assessment because I think he was really good in that game last week as well. But yeah, but I mean, besides that, no Bryce Heem, which is still a big miss. So they've gone with AJ Lamb as the 12, which is actually interesting. AJ Lamb, he's actually gone over. He's gone all over the place in terms of his positions. He's kind of becoming a lot more versatile, I'd say, in what he's doing for the Blues, which is awesome to have, actually. But yeah, Matt, I'm going to you because before I could talk about the Blues all day. Like, what do you think about this game? But particularly, what do you think the Fijian Drua can do to kind of stop the Blues in this one?
Well, they have to find that away form, don't they? But we haven't seen it yet throughout the season. Their coach had mentioned at the start of the season they needed, in his eyes, at least 2 away wins throughout the season to really have a good chance of making the quarterfinals. And yes, they've still made the quarterfinals, but they haven't registered those away wins that they were after. And I'll be honest, when looking through at this side, my biggest concern is Frank Lamani. That man's discipline lately has been game-changing and pretty much costing them quite a bit. You know, I don't understand why, unless, of course, there is an injury that's stopping Simeone Kuravuli from being available, but Pene Matawalu off the bench, I believe, is a good option, and I honestly feel if injury-free, Kuravuli should be starting because Lamani where he's shown already throughout the season that, when he's getting frustrated, he'll just elbow a bloke and then get himself suspended. Or he'll end up kicking a ball away that's a certain try and get a yellow card that costs his team 2 or 3 tries. That almost changed the momentum in that game up against the Rebels, by the way. That yellow card of Lamani just seemed to give the Rebels half a sniff to get back into it. And, he's been out of form, but they decide to continue to pick him. So I think that could cost them. Finley Christie as the 9. Of course, wasn't supposed to be in the starting lineup last week, but because all the teams have done this weird thing,
the
switch at the last moment. Funaki was left out, Rieko Ioane was left out. Yet they're both playing in this game, so did they just not feel like playing on the day? It's a really weird one that there's so many changes. Like it's only the last few weeks though, isn't it? Like before that, the lineup that was announced was the lineup on the field, whereas the last few weeks it's been the lineup is announced, and then you switch 5 things depending on what your opponent's done, so that you can kind of get that little bit of a matchup a little bit better. But the Blues should win this. And if they don't, I'll be honest, I feel like I'm looking forward to next week when we hear a 10-minute rant involving swear words from Tim saying what the Blues ruined their season.
Just watch my live stream then. You could just watch my end of the live stream. You could just get my take on if that actually were to happen. But it's one of those ones where when we've ever faced the Fijian Drua, to be fair to the Blues, they've actually, I don't believe they've lost to the Fijian Drua.
No, they normally nullify the way that the Fijians attack, don't they?
That's what they do. Yeah, and again, that's what the Blues, have kind of been known for this season. Is their defense. But they have, just going off the previous games they've played as well. I think the Blues have done well to kind of get the scoreline early, up early. So then the Fijian Drua just don't have as much of a chance to kind of come back into the game, because again, that's what the Fijian Drua are known for. Actually, is kind of getting points in that kind of second half, making the late comeback. And if the Blues aren't careful, then the Fijian Drua can do that. So it's one of those where the Blues just have to get off the mark quickly. Again, they've been, maybe I'm wrong in saying this because, of course, as you guys know, I'm a Blues fan. And but I think the Blues actually have the best kickoff. In terms of any team I've seen, they honestly, I think they've won the ball more times with their own kickoff than any other team. And that comes with Caleb Clark. Caleb Clark is unbelievable. Where he can just take it with one hand, just takes it down. It's okay, there you go, boys. We're in the game. So it's just a matter of seconds where they're just quicker in that aspect. And so if I was Fijian Drua, just don't try not to make that happen. Just make sure you hold on to the ball, or at least get a player up higher than Caleb Clark, because somehow he's able to kind of do a slam dunk maybe over you. But no, it's one of those where I think the Blues, like you said, should be able to win this. They're definitely going in as the favorites. And it's interesting. It's interesting. And I'm not sure how this works actually, because I saw this has been a record that was been talked about a long time, but I'm not sure if it continues or not because we're now in the playoffs. But I saw that Tutu now got his 11th try in that previous game, now up to 11. But the record is I think 12, and it's Doug Hollett. You have Reiko, you have Akira, I believe. All of them are in kind of in conversation of you've done pretty well in terms of individual seasons. I'm not sure if he's still if that's now closed now, that record, if he can't go for it, or if it continues on to the playoffs.
It continues, because I know that the regular Super Rugby stats do continue, because of course Sever Reece leading try scorer at the moment with 12.
So can he still overtake Sever Reece? Is that how it works?
I believe he still can get a couple more and then go up to the top, and of course that would in turn give the Blues that record as well. But cool. I think it is more down to the fact, no offense to the Blues, but normally they get knocked out before we get to the point
exactly.
of
That's what I was saying.
having
We don't really have a chance of doing that.
Of being able to beat it. So they've given them more games potentially to reach that record now.
Yeah, agreed. But again, moving on towards the last quarterfinal of this round, which is Brumbies versus Highlanders. This is one which I think, because I was actually listening to the breakdown earlier, and it's actually very fascinating because you have, they're kind of discussing how from a Brumbies standpoint, this is definitely a game which they'll want any day of the week, because they're very confident at home. That's where it's kind of similar towards the Fijian Drua, where they're great at home when it's in front of their fans in Canberra. But again, for the Highlanders, you can make the arguments that this is probably the game which they would want, actually, when you're thinking about all the teams they could have faced in that top 4. Because when you look at the record, actually, between all the other sides in New Zealand, they've only won once now, in the past few years now. And again, that one win getting into the Crusaders this season. So it's one of those, actually, when you look at it from a history standpoint, this actually could do the Highlanders kind of a service here and actually have a better chance going into this game. But again, you have to be fair and kind of go a formal to what we've seen throughout the season. And the Brumbies have just been, again, just a great team to watch. Just been very impressive, like I said, at home. But again, I've been able to kind of get a few away wins in there, including that away win against the Highlanders in Dunedin. So it's one of those like where they definitely have that kind of edge over them, I'd say, going into this game. But hey, you can never really count out the Highlanders. I actually haven't even seen their lineup, so I'm actually looking at it right now. I'm interested to see who they pick at the 10. Nice. Okay, so they have Goldman Miller. Okay, so they actually have a better chance. If they didn't go with him, I was a bit like, okay, there may be a bit. They went with someone like Feafanga because I thought he looked good actually in that game against the Hurricanes, but just I think Miller just has a lot more stability to him. He's not like he seems calmer actually when he plays. And that's not by the way, you can go either two ways about it, but I just like the way that he plays in terms of the number 10 position, and I kind of think it suits for Folau Fakatava as well, because I like him to be more of like the aggressor in terms of like kind of pressuring the kind of opposing team's defense. But what's your thoughts on this one? Because again, this could be another one that kind of goes either way.
It could be. And once again, I feel like there is the little bit of a problem in the Brumbies backline at the moment, and that is, sadly, Tamati Tua. His discipline has been the thing that has let them down quite a bit recently. I don't know how many cards that bloke's collected throughout this season. He's starting to get quite a few, though. So, that's a concern, because if you get a card in a final, it always hurts you. And during the regular season, what are you laughing about, Tim? Are you thinking of the World Cup
you looked me dead in the eye. I was like, okay, I know exactly what he's on about. But
I wasn't even referring to the World Cup final.
Okay, yeah, some other game. Yeah.
Yeah, it could have been the Super Rugby final from last year. We saw that yellow card, Sam Cane, didn't we? But it's just, it hurts you, These are the type of games that you don't even want to be giving away 3-pointers, let alone giving away the penalty try for 7 or something along those lines. So the Brumbies at home at GIO Stadium have been really hard to beat. And the Highlanders, they have for this whole season, even, I know that this is controversial, but even with the Crusaders doing so poorly, people have still seen the Highlanders as the weakest New Zealand side. At least that is the word on the street here in New Zealand. And I feel like they want to show everyone that, yes, the Crusaders have had a bad season, and yes, they were able to beat them when they were having a bad season, but they can also beat other sides, even if they're in Australia, take down the Aussies. But the chances of no Australian team being in the semi-finals, I feel like, is extremely slim. It's also not what, Rugby Australia wanted in the, I guess, inclusion of 8 quarterfinalists rather than the 4. Which I think next year we've got to change it, don't we? It's got to be either 4 or 6, something along those lines, don't we?
Yeah.
It's too many teams. You can't be through to the quarters when you've only won like 4 or 5 games out of 14, can you?
I agree. And by the way, this is something which I don't think has actually been discussed beforehand. So maybe the first one to actually say this is a possibility.
Inside scoop.
Well, no. This is the inside scoop here. But I have a prediction here, which just if there's a scenario where, of course, with the Rebels now leaving Super B next year and we'll be down to 11 teams, there's a scenario in which what could happen is, like, if there aren't enough time to bring in like a new side like the Jaguares or Sunwolves, or just a team that's kind of been a part of Super B in the past, or even like a new team actually, then what I think the angle which they can go with is actually similar towards what you just said there, where you can kind of make it so you give more teams a chance, but also make it more competitive, I'd say. So like you have like the top 6 that no matter what would qualify. That's the way I would see it. But then you could have it where it depends. You can go either two ways. You can go like where you do a top 6, and then top 4 really, and then you could just do semifinals and then the final. That's like the way I'm seeing it. Or you could do it where you still stick with the 8 teams, but then whoever finishes 7th and whoever finishes 8th, then you play an extra match. So so you have a similar scenario where it's happened within the NBA, like where it's called like a play-in match. So you're playing to get into the playoffs. So you play that one game, and whoever wins that. So even if you finish 8th, you have a chance in getting in. But again, you have to remember that the whole scenario would be that. It would be 9th, wouldn't it? It would be 9th actually, who kind of goes into it. So it's all over the place and how it could work. But again, it kind of goes against, I guess, now the more I'm thinking about it goes against what you want.
You've just said you don't want a team who's had 5 wins to go through, and you're like, now we'll give the chance to the team who's had 3 wins in the season.
I wouldn't mind it. I actually wouldn't mind it. Because I actually wouldn't mind seeing a team like, I don't know, like Modern Pacifica even getting a shot in the playoffs, because it'd be kind of cool to see what they could be doing.
Yeah, but then would they just get beaten easily in the next game?
You never know. You never know. I mean, the Modern Pacifica have improved. You can definitely say this year. And again, just going off kind of what we were saying off the Australian sides, I think Australia have done really well this year in terms of what they've kind of produced in terms of a lot of the results. So if I think actually, like, this may be a bold thing to say, but I actually want them to have 2 sides in that semifinal. I think that they actually deserve 2 sides, just going off what we've seen throughout this year, just what they've been able to produce in terms of results, and just like, I guess that's the mentality they've kind of just shown to us, because they've kind of proven us wrong in a lot of ways throughout this year. So I think that they definitely deserve that kind of having maybe an even match in terms of New Zealand and Australia. But the question is, will that happen? I don't know. But so yeah, I guess in your case, are you favoring the Brumbies to win this one, or are you going with the Highlanders?
Yeah, I think the Brumbies will take it. I think the Highlanders will try and make it competitive, which is good. But at the same time, it's just so hard to win in Canberra, isn't it? Like, it just seems to never go in favour of the away side. And I know that this isn't a dig at all, but there's not very often that we see an away side with a better penalty count than the Brumbies when playing at GIO Stadium, so that's another thing. You're going to make sure your discipline's on point, and, when you got Tenuela Talia, who has that massive mullet on him and loves a clothesline, she's just going to be a hard day at the office. But, it's going to be fun, isn't it, the quarterfinals, Tim? URC, though, just around the corner too, quarterfinals. Going to be taking place. We might as well jump straight into that. I know that for yourself, you're back in the Brumbies because you want to see the Australian teams.
I'm back in the Brumbies.
That was pretty self-explanatory, I thought, after your comments. But, yeah, URC, we're going to get to see the top 8 sides from that competition. Now, that is a competition that makes sense to have a top 8 because there are 16 sides, chopping them in half, very close at the end in terms of who was going to make their way through. The Ospreys needed a bonus point away from home.
Lions getting, oh gosh,
yeah, they managed to do it. The Ospreys in the end getting the away win over Cardiff, knocking the Lions out. Munster, they managed to get themselves the win over Ulster, which then gave them the spot at the top. So we could see games taking place at Thorpe Park pretty much the whole way throughout the playoffs. But the quarterfinals for the URC, they are as follows. For the first game, it will be Munster versus Ospreys. Next game is Glasgow versus the Stormers. Those 2 sides on the same side of the draw, so whoever wins those 2 respectively will make their way through to the semi-finals. On the other side of the draw, it will be Bulls versus Benetton. That is happening at Loftus. And then Leinster versus Ulster, the Irish derby. And whoever wins those 2 games will then face each other in the semi-finals. So we'll jump straight to you, Tim. We won't go as in-depth, seeing as we don't know the lineups of these sides. But what are you thinking? Who do you think's winning these games?
Gosh, I actually, it kind of changes my thinking in terms of now that I now know kind of who's facing who in terms of the semifinals. But I just going off what we've seen throughout this year, I've been just for the first one that you talked about with Munster versus Ospreys, I think Ospreys have done very well to get kind of in this scenario, actually, to their credit. Like, I don't think a lot of people would have expected them to be in this situation, but I just think Munster are too strong. I mean, like, when you look at their side, they've just been, it's one of those where I'll be surprised. That's probably the wrong word. I'll be surprised if Munster, if Ospreys do something. It's just more, I just think Munster are just a stronger side in general. So I'm going with them to kind of win that one. What about yourself?
See, I do think that Munster should win it. The only concern I have there is they might be too complacent, seeing as they're facing an Osprey side that are a lot lower down, and maybe that makes them think, we don't have to work as hard. It's going to be the game afterwards. I think it's surprising that Glasgow have found themselves in 4th at the end of the regular season because they were near number 1, and unfortunately just due to dropping a few extra points, they make their way down. But they're up against the Stormers. I feel like that's going to be a pretty awesome game. And I feel like Munster, would it have been more competitive if it was the Lions? Maybe just a little bit. But I still think Munster will get themselves a win there. For that Glasgow versus Stormers game, home field advantage, I think it's going to be a big one for Glasgow, although their form recently hasn't been the greatest. Same could be said about the Stormers, though. They started the season with a hiss and a roar, and then from there, they've kind of dwindled a little bit. That loss to La Rochelle in the Champions Cup, I think, hurt the confidence quite a bit. Also, losing Damien Valimza due to injury, that hasn't really helped them too much. And also not having Dion Foree as another player in there for the Stormers side. Good old Dion. How did you used to pronounce his last name?
Dion Foree. I've always said that.
No, you haven't. We've got to go back and watch some of those old school
watch the tapes.
Predictions. But, of course, that's going to be a good game at the end of the day. And I feel like defensively matching up is going to be quite entertaining. I'm gonna say Glasgow in that game.
Yeah, no,
I'm bold.
I'm sad.
And
I think like Glasgow just for what I've seen at them at home, similar to kind of similar scenario to what we were saying with a lot of the Super Rugby sides. Like they're just a better team when they play at home. And again, a lot of their players have been really impressive this year. So I think it's in their favor. And like you said, from a Stormers point of view, they're lacking in terms of depth going into this game. Like you said, loss of Williams is just the key one really. So I think Glasgow should be able to get the job done. So I guess in terms of the third one though, I mean this is the one which I'm a bit let me just say for Leinster versus Ulster. I think this is one where I think Ulster actually could shock a few people in this one. I'm not, by the way, I'm only saying this because of what we saw in that Champions Cup final with Leinster. Are they still hurting? We'll have to wait and see, because it's one of those where Ulster on their day they can definitely surprise a team or two. But the question is, if Leinster are kind of the same team which we've seen throughout this year, then they should have no problem in this game. But I mean, what's your thoughts? Are you kind of swaying towards one way, or you just think this could be a close game overall?
I think it's going to be a pretty close one. Leinster, like you mentioned, that Champions Cup final in a similar fashion to the Stormers, it's hurting them a little bit because they did think that once they got past La Rochelle, that was going to be a little bit easy, and then they had to face DuPont and Toulouse, and they did lose in the end for that game. But, I'm backing them to win it, and just to put it out there, I think that the Bulls are going to win their game, which is then going to give us a championship or kind of like a competition level matchup of South Africa versus Ireland in South Africa as a bit of a prelude to what we're going to see later on. There's also a chance on the other side of the draw that we see Munster versus the Stormers, which is also a little bit of a prelim per se, although the only difference is the fact that it would in fact be in Ireland rather than in South Africa for that game. But I think that Ireland and South African sides, they're looking the more dangerous, I would say, at this stage of the competition. But there are a few outliers, like the Scottish, the Welsh, the Italians, and of course another Irish side that, they could cause themselves a big enough upset and get through to that final, which is only a few weeks away. It's going to be on the same weekend as the matchup taking place for Super Rugby's final, so plenty of big games. It's kind of weird that the Premiership is over so early, isn't it? But I guess with the games up against the Japanese, they have to try and get them
they're kind of go ahead
organised there.
Yeah, but I am with you, by the way, with the Bulls winning that game against Benetton. And again, I think like what you said with Glasgow, I think Glasgow's the only team, I think, outside of like the Irish or South African teams that actually have a chance in actually making it to the final. Because again, you could say it's a favorable matchup. I mean, not a favorable matchup, but you're not going against the likes of Leinster or Bulls, who I think have been very impressive this year. And again, Glasgow, like we said, they've fallen off recently down towards that fourth position, but they've been pretty comfortable, I'd say, throughout this year. So it's one of those where I think they definitely have a shot in beating the likes of Munster, I think, who we both predicted to kind of win that one. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But man, Bulls Leinster, that's going to be a heck of a game. The more I think about it, but I'm looking forward to it. We
can't get too excited yet, of course, because then Ulster they'll cause an upset and then throw a big
they could. They honestly could.
Maybe I know that this is absolutely wild to say, and I know that this will offend a lot of people, but imagine the scenes, right? We've already seen Benetton beat a South African side in South Africa. Imagine if Benetton beat the Bulls. Imagine the insane level. Yeah. And then that would mean that the Bulls players are then eligible to play up against Wales for the South Africans. That'll be the big one. That's the one that you want.
That's what I want, guys. That's
what we want. We want the Welsh.
That's
all part of Jake White's tactics.
Exactly.
He's got them. He's got them up there. He's worked it all out.
There you go, guys. There you go. But no, I think honestly, it's one of those where the Bulls, yeah, they should get the job in that one. And again,
They
like
should.
alluding to that Stormers kind of thing, like if the Stormers were actually to get through and face Munster, that's going to be a rematch to what we saw in the previous URC finals. So it would be interesting to see kind of that were to happen as well. But yeah, I am with you with I think all of the ones we kind of agreed on. So yeah, I guess for the last one, of course, which is the Premiership. This is the big one. This is the final now. It's actually going to be fascinating to see who wins between these two sides, because with Northampton and Bath just winning both the semifinals in, I'd say, good fashion. Again, Northampton had to kind of get past the likes of the Saracens. Like that was a close matchup actually when I looked more at those highlights. But again, I think Bath just kind of dealt Sale kind of with ease actually when the more kind of the game went on. But this one, I actually don't know what way it's going to go, because I think like I've always said that Northampton have been the better team throughout this year in terms of like, because you have to remember like I'm just thinking overall in terms of every competition they've been in. So because again, yeah, they did make it far within that Champions Cup. So you have to kind of be. I've been very impressed by, I guess, like the depth they've also had to kind of manage both competitions at the same time. But again, Bath have been a very good team to watch, and again with Finn there, I mean, it just makes it even more exciting. Like that, I don't even know which team I would support in this scenario, but I just think because I've backed kind of I've really enjoyed just what Northampton have done this year. I think I would go with them to win this one. And again, it would be kind of fitting that this is the last game I believe that Corny Laws would play within England before he kind of heads off as well. So that for another reason, I think that's kind of why I would like to see Northampton win. But man, Bath can when you look at that back line, it is just dangerous. Like Ollie Lawrence, like you got Finn Russell, you got what's his name, the winger. He's been really good recently for them. You have to remind me here. I can't remember.
You can do it yourself. Come on, you got it.
This is so bad.
You've got
I
it.
can't remember. No. Oh no. Maybe not the win. It's not South African. I'm thinking of the 15. I can't think of his name. The 15.
Come on, Tim. We're gonna play Guess Who.
This is so bad.
We're gonna stick them all on the board. Come on, he's right there. He's right there.
I see his face as well. I can see him. Like I know I've seen. Man, this is bad for me.
This is like Guess Who. Does he wear glasses? Does he ever?
No. Mate, you're not to tell me here, man. Because I'm either going to.
Should I make you look it up, or should I just tell you, Tim?
No, just tell me. This is.
Okay. So for Bath, the 15.
The 15. Yeah.
He's been doing well.
Yes, like
yes. I was just waiting to see whether or not it was going to kick it.
I can't get it, man. I can't think of it right now.
Okay, well, the 15, it is Gallagher.
That's it. Okay.
Is that the one you're thinking of?
Yeah, that's it.
You sure?
But what's his first name as well? Because that's what the one will.
I think it's Mad, isn't it? Or it starts with M anyway.
Yeah, Matt Gallagher. Yeah, it's like Gallagher, but he's like, I'm not saying. And by the way, don't get me. For every New Zealand fan here watching, just don't pull me down on this one. But he reminds me a slight bit of what Will Jordan does.
What, Tim? Are you crazy?
Kind of how he kind of can find gaps from the defense. Like I'm just saying, he reminds me a bit of that. But man, like I just think Bath have a great back line. But like I said, I will be supporting Northampton in that final. But what about yourself then? Which way do you think?
The last time that those two sides played, 43 points to 12 in favour of Bath, of course. But
there wasn't really
ago. Of course, exactly. A few changes since then. But I think Northampton should be able to get the job done, because like they were close in their game up against Leicester, and also I think that's something that there's a little bit underrated. It's just that speed of their backline. Like when they're doing their crisp passing, it was absolutely gorgeous in that game up against the Bulls. And Bath, to their credit, when you look at the Gallagher Premiership table last year, I think they were near the bottom, weren't they?
Yeah, they didn't have
at the end of last season,
yeah.
And then now they're sitting near the top with a big opportunity to go all the way. But yeah, I think Northampton should be able to take it. But it's a shame that it's on at the same time as a URC quarterfinal. That is the one silly thing that they've done about the Premiership. The fact that they tried to rush the competition to finish it early means that we don't get to see that game take place at a separate time, or else I think it would have been a thoroughly entertaining game to watch alongside, some playoff rugby that was taking place. But yeah, I'm going Northampton. But Tim, before we finish this podcast, I'm gonna get
Yeah.
you. I'm gonna what's it called? Gonna
Give my 2 cents
what's
here.
yeah, good pun. But I'm trying to think of the terminology. Gonna pick your brain. That's the one.
Okay.
I'm gonna
Okay.
pick at your brain, Tim. And I'm gonna ask you, what's your thought of the finish to the sevens that we saw last week?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Jeez. You know what? I'll be completely honest with you. I watched that Ireland game, and I didn't even watch the rest of the South African games. I was so infuriated how they let that slip. But I'm just in the South African ones. I watched the other ones, of course, but just I couldn't just bear watch this. That game, I was just like, they did so well, like, to manage the game, and then they give up the, like, I just like. Oh, it was just so frustrating to watch that. But man, in terms of the Challenger Series, though, the teams, man, like I was very pleased to see Uruguay get in, because they were the team I really wanted to get in towards that. Make it for next year. But man, Kenya, I was like, whoa, that's awesome. Like, it's awesome to see them in, because I think I generally wanted to see Uruguay, but I think for everyone who's watched sevens for a while, everyone loves Kenya, so it's obviously kind of good to see him back within the circuit for next year. But again, in saying that, there is the I know it hurts you probably more than me, but Canada, of course, not in there, but the big one being Samoa, which has been knocked down a bit into the Challenger Series, which is it is crazy. The how do I put this nicely? Like the how kind of down they've gone, I'd say, in the past few in the past year or so. But I mean, what's your take on that? Because I was astonished when I saw that they actually did make it through.
Well, Tim, I was going to make a video about this, because it's not so much that it's Samoa as well, I should clarify.
Yeah.
Like, I just think that the way that they've done the format of that whole Challenger Series was just... I'm going to mute myself for one of these words, but it was just stupid, the way that they decided to go with the layout of that one. Hopefully I muted at the right time. That would have been
if you do,
bad if I muted everything but the swear word. But it's just dumb, really, the way that they decided to do it. Like, at the end of the day, I can understand doing that type of thing to get a team promoted, but then to have 4 of the teams who are on the circuit with the possibility of all losing their spot from the get-go just seems really idiotic in terms of World Rugby or the sevens departments side of things. Like, that game between USA and Samoa, 2 sides that I think 100% should be on the circuit, was one of the most uncomfortable live streams we have ever done on the channel, because of course you wanted to celebrate someone scoring, but at the same time that the team that loses this game is not just going to lose that match, but they're going to lose funding because they're no longer on the main circuit. They're going to lose countless jobs of coaches and players and everything along those lines in a contest that, in my opinion, shouldn't have even happened, because USA won all of their group stage matches. So what was the point of winning all those games if then you still have to then fight in a one-off winner-takes-all match? Like, it just seemed like a bit of an emotional roller coaster. And even the USA players, like, they didn't want to win that game at times. Like, you could see it at the end. Like, I think it was maybe Va'a Pilo Maliko scored the last try of the match for the Samoans. Put the ball down and straight away gets a massive hug from one of the USA players, because he knew that meant now that Samoa are pretty much losing everything that they had because of the way that the competition was laid out. Like, if Canada, for instance, seeing as they were at the bottom of the regular series, were then relegated, and one of the 4 top Challenger Series, they play off in a semi and a final layout to then move one team up, that would have made perfect sense. Maybe even the bottom 2 sides, and then you have a mini series to allow the Challenger teams to get promoted up. But even 2 teams losing from a circuit seems like it's a little bit abrupt. But then the fact that they could have lost 4 teams, we could have been looking at a Challenger or a main series without the USA, without Samoa, Spain, or Canada. Like, I think that they have to
I'm actually
change
against
it.
you, by the way, in terms of the
I know
series.
you are, because you'll probably say in football it happens all the time. You see teams going up and down.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the thing, where I think you also have to remember the reason why we have this in place as well is, yes, it sucks for the teams that, like you said, people can lose jobs from this scenario in terms of what we've seen through Samoa, Canada, for the sides that are coming down into the Challenger Series. But you also have to bring the positive aspect to it, where you're having teams from the Challenger Series who have worked their way to this position to kind of get. It's a one-off game, so for them, it's more important to win that game than the teams. Yeah,
but I think, sorry to cut you off, if we still had 16 teams on the circuit, losing the bottom 4 would make sense. But in a 12-team competition, imagine if the teams that don't make it to the quarterfinals in Super Rugby all then have to play South American teams for their spot on the circuit. But first, they have to play in 3 separate games up against them to decide rankings to then go into a playoff game. Like, in a competition with 12 teams, I don't think you can afford to lose 33% of your competition in one swoop. You know, like, it just seemed a little bit abrupt. And, like, people have been saying it was just pretty much a money spinner for the way that the competition was, with the fact it was in Madrid, which had already plenty of other events that were taking place, which is why attendance wasn't the best. But, like, yeah, I can see what you're saying with the Challenger Series teams getting...
I like it.
It's a big opportunity for Kenya, who shouldn't have been sacked from the series in the first place, I don't believe.
Yeah.
I feel like the 16 teams, why are we doing this whole best third place team goes through in the groups when we could just have it the top 2 with a little bit... And I'll be honest, all of the teams that we're playing off in that Challenger Series, I don't think would look out of place on the main circuit. So why don't we just make it 16 teams and then have the bottom 2 or so, then have the Challenger Series, get the promotions going?
See, I understand what you're saying, but the problem, and this is where maybe a slight bit of bias comes in, because, you know, when it comes to sevens, like, the one team I will support when it comes to sevens any day of the week when it's Hong Kong is the Hong Kong team. And they're in a scenario where, like, there's not like going off the previous, not what it is now, but the previous kind of how everything works in terms of qualification. There wasn't a really good format around that, because it only happened where you would have teams who then face off near towards the end, actually when the qualification actually started, and then you would have it like where you have a 1 or 2, and there wouldn't even be an opportunity to kind of go into that kind of scenario, because there were times where, like you said, it was just a closed gate scenario. But now that it's open, it means that teams can actually go into it and kind of have an opportunity to kind of rise up the ranks, and that's the most important thing from this. Because even though, like, I was heartbroken when I saw Hong Kong didn't make it to the Challenger Series, because I know that on their day, like we've seen, Uruguay and Kenya now go up into the main circuit, which is what I wanted for Hong Kong, because it's like every team has an opportunity to do this. And yes, you are right that, you know, it sucks. It sucks more for the teams that are in that scenario who have to play these matches, like the USA, like what was it? It was USA, Spain, I believe.
Spain, Canada,
and
then Samoa.
Yeah. So it's like for all those 4 teams, I understand fully what you're saying, where it's like you never want to be put in this scenario, but at the same time, you also like you did this to yourselves actually throughout the season. Like, your form was what cost you in this scenario. Like, where there's a lot of and then, by the way, and the big case I can make to this, and the one team that actually makes probably the best example is Great Britain, because they understood their assignment where when it came towards that tournament. I'm trying to remember. It was
the last
Singapore.
one, wasn't it?
It was in Singapore that they knew their assignment, that they needed to finish in this position because they would survive, and
they actually didn't. Which is the crazy thing. Up until the second day, I believe it is, they didn't know. It was actually a commentator who told the captain, because he was like, "Do you guys?" I remember it was the post.
Yeah. I know you're saying. Yeah,
and he was going like, "So, what do you guys think about, like, are you guys trying to get to those playoffs to try and get more points than the USA?" And he said, "I didn't even know that was a thing." So then I wonder if that was with
but that's why I like it. Like, they actually
change.
stepped it up. So it's one of the. But that's why I kind of like it. It brings an added aspect to this 7 series, which I think is missing. Because again, I'm not saying the 7 series is. I think it's actually a great competition. Like, I think every player you ask enjoys doing the 7s, because you get to go all around the world and you get to compete against teams at different countries. It is the most awesome experience, I'd say, in terms of rugby. But if I think, like, actually if there was one competition I would love to play in, it would be within the 7s, like playing for your national team. I think it would be awesome. But like you say, it's just more of a transition period for both these sides now. You're kind of going under into the Challenger Series. And by the way, I think Samoa and Canada, I think definitely have the capability of rising up again for the following one. I think they both have the opportunity to, because Canada have been very impressive. I think both you and me have discussed how in a weird way, I think Canada have a better chance than Samoa because I've been more impressed by Canada this year in terms of the results they've actually picked up than Samoa. Because Samoa, you expect a lot more of them, but they let you down. But it's like, but you could also say there's been a lot of injuries from a Samoan standpoint. So like I don't know, it kind of balances itself out, I guess. But
does it
look,
concern you in terms of the amount of like championship sides per se that we could see in the Challenger Series just dominating every round now? Like, because I honestly feel like Samoa and Canada for the championship like level teams going down to the Challenger Series and dominating. Because, when you look at Samoa, if they keep their funding, same with Canada, I could see those sides going each and every week, winning time after time after time type thing. And then, does that ruin the Challenger Series? There are a lot of factors that could happen. And the fact that, I still look at someone like the USA, and I know this didn't happen, right? But there was a chance they could have won 3 of their games, played off against the Samoans and lost. And then what does that do to USA Rugby? They haven't exactly had a bad season. Yes, they've had a couple hiccups along the way, but they've still been in top 4s a few times. They've got the 2031 Rugby World Cup, but imagine that the 7 circuit, they don't even have the USA on it, so that takes away pretty much any American audience. I do think that it should still be 16 teams, and I think that it should be, if you're going to do the bottom 4 playoff, it should be that it's of the 16 teams. And then that brings the opportunity for the likes of the Hong Kong side to have an opportunity on the circuit.
In a weird way, by the way, and this may be just because it hasn't happened, I'm saying this, but I actually wouldn't be as gutted, actually, if the USA lost that game in Samoa. Because, like you alluded to, the USA have that World Cup in 2031, which it's like, even like the head of World Rugby has been said, like that is the main mission in World Rugby right now, is to kind of aim towards that World Cup because we need to grow that fan base right off the back. And I think the USA Sevens team has actually been the most successful thing about USA Rugby actually throughout the past 10 years, really. So it's one of those where if they were to go under, this is, I'm not saying this is, it kind of goes, there's a negative to this, of course, but I'm saying the positive is that it would help the 15s game a bit as well, because you would have a lot of these players transitioning into the MLR for one season to kind of just improve their 15s capability and kind of just get used to that. Because at the end of the day, like I'm not saying, because again, like people like myself, like if I had to have a choice playing 7s and 15s, I'd probably maybe go in between the two, but there's players who just want to
like 12s or so, wouldn't you?
Yeah, exactly. but I can see players who just want to play 7s all the time. But I'm just saying from a USA standpoint, because the priority is to kind of improve these players, they have a good squad actually, young talent in there as well that can kind of progress and actually play in that World Cup in the future. I just think it wouldn't be as bad as it would be. But I think for Samoa though, it's just. That's a big blow for them because again they don't have the financial resources compared to the likes of the US for what they're kind of being given. So that's where I agree that it's kind of a big blow to them. But what I will say though, and this is something which you haven't pointed out, but I'm actually more infuriated by how the winners are decided in this Madrid one rather than the Challenger Series. Because what I hate about this though is that because France won this tournament, it means now that they're seen as the champions of the whole series. When actually, no, Argentina won the whole thing. That's the thing that infuriates me more, actually, because I've seen stuff online that says, no, France are now the Sevens champions for this year. I'm like, what do you want about? Argentina won the whole the series circuit, but again, like, it's like, that's what I kind of hated about, like, that's like the way they kind of portrayed that. By the way, it could have been any team, but like I'm just saying, because France won, like they portrayed them as the ones who won the whole series, when actually they've only won this Madrid one and the what was it?
It was a couple ago, wasn't it? When
the USA
DuPont was back as well.
Yeah, so like it's like they've won 2 tournaments, and again they did get to that final in Hong Kong, but it's one of those where I was a bit tilted when I saw that. I was like,
it's really it's obvious that it's something that someone said was a good idea, and they said, look at all the extra. I honestly do think it's a money spinner in both regards.
It 100% is. It 100%
like the fact that, imagine being an Argentine player now and everyone's going, oh, but you didn't actually win, did you? You only got you didn't win in the important one, which was the main playoff game. And it's like, yeah, but no, like they already got crowned as. So what's the difference? One of them's the series champion, one of them's
Exactly.
the the
No,
the,
so
the competition champion or
So
something
what's
like
even
that.
crazier, by the way, and what's even crazier is that if you go into like the Sevens history now, France are now seen as the champions
Yeah,
of
even though
this year.
every other year
Exactly.
has been done off the points, isn't
Exactly.
it?
This is why. This is why. This
So
is what I just
it's
I didn't under like. That's what I hate more about this kind of like the
yeah.
not sorry, haters is the wrong word. 'Cause
Use the word. Go on, Tim. Use the
yeah,
word.
it's just I'm kind of against kind of the
Mm.
idea of what in terms
You
of
hate
how
it.
they
Yeah.
portray who wins this one. But in terms of the
Mm.
Challenger Series, I love it because it's needed. I think it's needed. That's actually needed. And
I do agree. I think that promotion and relegation
yeah,
is very
it adds
important.
another aspect.
It just
But
shouldn't have 33% of the
yeah,
teams.
but also, by the way, and this kind of this is the last point I wanted to make on this, and this may be a reason why I kind of like overall I'd favor this kind of the new series overall. It's just because with this tournament, just this tournament getting a lot of money, it helped, and I guess throughout the other series circuits as well. I assume that they get paid by each tournament, whatever. But for this tournament, it's like you're going to get more money raised from this one than you would normally do, and it means that you could have similar to what's seen within football through the Premier League and the Championship, where the teams that get relegated from the Premier League actually get a chunk of money that allow them to kind of be stable and kind of maintain themselves to have the ability to kind of rise again. Because a lot of the time, if you don't have that, what's the best way of calling it? Like a severance package in a way. It's kind of like you get that kind of package which allows you to kind of help your team kind of play the players that you have. But the problem with this though, and this is where I will say this is where it can get worse, because I've seen this within football, is if the team that goes down, so in the case which is Samoa, Canada, and then of course it was like Germany and Chile,
and
who again
Chile. Yep.
and Chile, who again those two are already in. But I'm just saying particularly for Canada and Samoa, if those two don't qualify for the year after, then that's where it gets serious, because that's where I can compare it to other sports where if you don't make it a year after, the pay salary, oh my gosh, it will go down. So that's where you have to be very careful, and that's why a lot of those players and those teams will definitely be motivated. So I'm hoping to get back to that. I really hope
with the current format, right?
Yeah,
Samoa and Canada could be undefeated other than facing each other throughout the whole next 12 months.
Hong Kong is at the top. I don't know what you're
then, no. And then they can win all three of their games in their group stages to qualify first on both sides. And then they can lose to a team who's 8th, and then they stay there, you know?
Well, no, like it's the top 4, by the way. It's the top 4.
But there's no reward for being good other than being in that top 4. Like I feel like the top qualifier from the Challenger Series, this is my honest take. Top qualifier from the Challenger Series should automatically get promoted, and the bottom side should automatically get demoted, and then you can have a little maybe.
So how will that work then? This is by the way. Again, this is where it comes. How do you then decide? Because it's like it's the exact same scenario. Because you're having the two teams that go up, the two teams that go, like what? You're just going to do who has. Yeah.
I believe that you could have maybe the top 2 sides from the Challenger Series outside of the number 1. So you have 2 versus 3. Yeah. Whoever wins that game then ends up in a head-to-head up against the side who's in the Champions one, who have been decided by 10 versus 11. They play off, because I feel like they made it into a whole competition of like multiple games that honestly could have been done.
Is that what you're saying?
I believe that if you are already qualified for the Olympics, you shouldn't have the possibility of losing your spot on the circuit just because, like, Kenya should have never been taken away. Like, they didn't do anything wrong.
I agree, but the problem, and this is where money comes in, by the way.
Yeah, bloody money makes the world go round.
The only team who would have taken their place, respectively, would have been Spain, probably, because that's probably the one team where, when you look at the rest, you wouldn't remove any other teams. But of course, Spain got that Madrid tournament. Actually, a very successful tournament. Actually, in my opinion, it actually was really well done. So it's definitely someone which it'll continue to be there for the future, I believe. But it's just one of those like where if you had to make the tough choice, Spain would be the one that goes out, and then you put Kenya in there. But it's yeah. Look,
I just don't like
we can go
seeing
on for this for
sides
days,
losing.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
No,
I feel like
I understand. I understand.
that Samoa USA game sucked, and everyone in the chat was just sad. Like, I was sad too, because I was like, oh, it's a try, which means one of these teams are leaving. And then we had to be all excited because Germany were playing Kenya, and that was going to be for someone to get promoted. And we are like, yay, go teams.
but aren't you excited? Because I mean, I would love that. Because
yeah, that game was alright. It was just the one beforehand where we were like, oh yeah, these two sides have been there since before me and you were born on the Seventh Circuit. They've had great legends on both of those sides. And now, bye-bye, see you later. See you on the Challengers Series.
Fair enough, fair. But, okay, well,
sorry for bringing that up, Tim. That was about a 30-minute topic.
I'm actually happy you brought that up, because it was something which we actually forgot to plan into this episode, but I'm happy you brought it up. But yeah, I mean, that was a great, obviously, and again, we'll still talk about sevens actually, because we'll talk about it for the Olympics as well. So I'm looking forward towards that. Again, hoping if South can actually qualify, because we still haven't done that yet. We still have to go for the repechage tournament.
At least they're not on the Challenger Series.
Yeah, but trust me, I hate how South Africa's put themselves in this scenario, because if I'm not mistaken, Kenya is actually qualified already for the Olympics and not South Africa, because they beat them in that one game. So it's just like, it's one of those like where you can make the argument, again, just going what we said, Kenya's already in the Challenger Series. Should they just automatically go up because they're an Olympic spot? I mean, like, this is where it's like,
make it 16 teams.
you just want more competition, but okay.
I find the stupidest thing ever is that whole, hey, we're the best place, third place team, and we're the second best place, because it's like, but you're still losing more games than you're winning, but you're getting bonus. I like the bonus points, but when they decide who's the team that finishes third because you lost by a slightly less margin than another side did, it's like, just piss that off, just give it. Just have 16 teams.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, fair.
I like the spinny chair though. I've enjoyed swaying back and forth.
Oh, it's good. People to move around here while you think.
You see that? Did you spot the little Easter egg down there?
Yeah, that's all I saw. Yeah. But okay, guys, we'll leave it there. Again, this has been a great episode. Actually, what is it? 1 minute? Well, actually, not 1 hour and 16 for this one. So it's up there with one of the longest, I believe, so far. But yeah, guys, hope you guys enjoyed that episode. Do me the absolute honor, guys. Like the video, really. Just like the video, guys. Definitely subscribe towards our channels if you haven't already. Check out our other episodes if you haven't. And yeah, we'll see you guys next time.
Bye-bye.